Welcome to Highly Sensitive, Happily Married, the podcast that teaches you to not only have an easier marriage as a sensitive woman, but to have one that feels more amazing by the day. Where you'll hear relatable stories, love advice that works, and coaching on how to have a marriage where feeling upset and disconnected is a thing of the past, and where instead a sense of loving connection and even fun and lightness is the norm. I'm Hannah Brooks, highly sensitive person, love expert, and marriage coach, and I'm so happy to be on this journey with you. Hello, my friends, and welcome to episode 154, where we are going to talk about other people's opinions in your relationship, or on your relationship, depending. We're going to talk about it, because sometimes other people have opinions about our relationship, about our partner, and we want to know how to handle that, right? But before we dive in, I want to tell you about, if you haven't heard of it and done it already, my new quiz that I made just for you to help you identify the very best, most important starting place for you personally to focus on to improve your very unique relationship. So it's just a 2-minute long quiz. It's called I Want a More Loving, Connected Marriage. Where do I start? And when you take it, I'm going to give you personal detailed steps for exactly what to do right away to make the fastest, most permanent shift towards that deeply connected, loving, light, team-filled marriage or relationship that you want with your significant other. So the direct link to take that free quiz is in the show notes or the description of this podcast. And you can find it over on my website at www.lifeisworthloving.com. If you scroll down, you'll find it right on the home page. So don't miss it. This is one way I was able to figure out how to help you all kind of individually without actually talking with you in person. So absolutely go take that quiz. And then listen to the teachings and everything I give you afterwards. Like dive into that. That's going to really help you. All right. So let's talk about other people's opinions in your relationship. Now, I want to remind you before we dive in that this podcast is really for you if you're looking to improve your marriage, right? If you want a better marriage. It's not so much for those of you who are just trying to figure out if you don't want to be in this marriage anymore. I do plan to make a podcast on this a little bit more, and I do want to remind you that I always believe that the best way to find out if this marriage that you're in now isn't one you want to be in is to do all the work on your side of the street that you can and show up from that place for 6 months, a year, and really like be your best in the marriage and see what happens, because you're going to get a lot more information that way when you've done your work on your side of the street to know if you want to be in this marriage for the long haul or not. But I did want to remind you today that everything I talk about is to help you improve your marriage, which will give you the most clarity possible about whether or not you want to stay in it. All right, so kind of piggybacking off of last episode, of course, as women, we often like to go to our friends and other people in our lives when something isn't going fully the way we want it to, or there's an issue. And of course, it is natural to want to get support that way. And as I said last week, there are two main dangers with this when it comes to friends and other people in our lives when our marriage isn't in tip-top shape. So last week we dove into one of them, and today we're going to dive into the second one, which is how easy it is when we share with others, or we talk about our marriage with others, or even if we're not talking about our marriage with them, to let their opinions, right? They might share their opinions freely. And for us to let those opinions color our relationship in unnecessarily negative ways. In other words, to let other people's opinions have a lot of weight in our relationship. I can't tell you how many times I've heard from clients something along the lines of, my friend told me she doesn't think he's right for me, or that they've heard their friend criticize their spouse, saying things like, I don't know what you see in him. And then, of course, they were left with all this extra doubt about their marriage. So most of the time when your friends say these kinds of things, if you've ever heard your friends say such things, they don't mean to do any harm to your marriage. In fact, they probably are confused in thinking that it's supporting you. Because obviously they want the best for you, right? And the other thing is they may be caught up in that sort of male bashing train that we talked about, the bandwagon that we talked about last week, because it's such a cultural norm, right? And on top of that, they may be playing off of your complaining about your partner, like all the times you vented to them to let off some steam. This is really pretty normal. But hear me, their negative opinion of your partner isn't necessarily a fair assessment of him and how good he is of a partner for you, right? Your friend is not you, nor are they in the relationship with him. So they can't really evaluate it, right? They can't really see what's happening in it. All they hear, if they hear anything, is your words about it. They might see some things as well, but they don't know the fullness of it. They don't know what's happening in the little intimate moments or behind closed doors or anything, right? So I seriously invite you to do your best to stop giving your power away to your friends' complaints and judgments of your partner. We'll talk more about that. One of the things I also notice is that many women do this in their heads. They give their power over how they feel about their partner to what they imagine other people are thinking about their partner. And they let that fuel more doubt about their partner. I remember one client who told me about how she feared that her friends found her partner boring, and then that made her question her own judgment in marrying him. But I want you to notice, it's not like her friend said, hey, I find your partner really boring. It was her fear that that's what her friends were thinking. So we can use our friends' quote unquote opinions even when they're not really our friends' opinions. We can use those against the health of our marriage. And I for sure don't want you to do that. But I also know how easy it is. I remember in my first marriage how one friend said to me, ooh, I don't know how you do it. The funny thing is she really liked my husband, but she said that. And then another friend said, I don't get him. He's just so quiet. That would be hard to live with. And for a bit, I let those comments have the power to make me question whether my husband was a good person to be with or not. But they did not know him like I did. They did not know our relationship like I did, and how his communication style and his quietness and his non-quietness emerged with me, right? So it was not a fair thing for me to let their limited idea of him paint my impression of him and my feelings about him. And when I saw this, it was easy to let their ideas go. So hear me. Other people are not the authority on your relationship. Other people's opinion about your partner, about your relationship, are not a trustworthy source of authority or wisdom or truth about your relationship or your spouse. And I would go so far as to say other people, I'm talking about friends and family, but I'm also talking about professionals. I mean, they're not necessarily authorities on your relationship either. I've seen and heard plenty of professional mental health or marriage counselors give advice or opinions that were just wrong or even harmful. I've had clients share that with me, specific incidences of this. And I've actually had that experience myself. So we can even take relationship professionals' opinions with a grain of salt. And this is also why I think of myself more as a collaborator with you to make your relationship what you want it to be, rather than the authority on your relationship. If anyone tells you or implies that they are the authority in your relationship, run the other way. But really, in this episode, we're talking primarily about regular people in our lives and their opinions in our relationship and what role they play. So the heartbreaking thing that I found is that I can't tell you how many clients have come to me even worse in a worse place and more confused because of the conversations they've had with friends who meant well, but whose thoughts and judgments that they shared with my client actually just made my clients feel less sure of their husband's goodness and doubtful of all that was good between them as well. So sometimes this might just be criticisms or what seem just like observations to these friends, or sometimes it's advice that they offer. Now, I want to point out that just because your friends care about you and want what's good for you, it doesn't mean they know what's right for you in your marriage, or that they have ever learned how to have a great marriage themselves, right? So be cautious when taking advice. But really, I find it a shame and, like I said, heartbreaking when women go to their friends and open up about where things are hard in their relationship, and what they hear back is more confirming of like their worst fears in a way. Because it really is hard enough to help our own brains stay out of that sort of lizard brain negativity where we're seeing only the bad stuff and focusing on it, right? So if you've been listening to this podcast, you know what I'm talking about. It's hard enough to turn towards all the good, brilliant, and wonderful parts of our partner and keep those at the forefront, right? So we don't need our friends making it harder for us. Because here's the other interesting thing. They are also governed by their lizard brain. I want you to think about it like this. Your friends and family care about you, and that means there's likely a part of them that's protective of you. And most often our quote unquote protective part is also, hear this, very primitive, very fear-based, like the oldest, least evolved part of us. And I call this the lizard brain. It's a very biased part of us. It's the part that protects us by judging, by seeing the bad, by focusing on what's wrong, and being afraid and even harsh. But coming from that place is never where we're going to grow the best relationship from. It just isn't. On top of this, when your friends are expressing a negative opinion of your partner, they are seeing through their very own filter, what I call filter, like their own glasses, much of which may be falsely negative or biased based on their own personal history. So, for example, if they happen to have been hurt by someone who had similar qualities as your partner, let's just say like a subtle, like it could be as subtle as like a certain way he moves his body, they may subconsciously be associating your partner with that pain they felt because of this other person, and thus have negative feelings towards your partner, even though he is a very different person, right? This is the kind of thing that happens with us humans. Or in another example, perhaps my friend who didn't relate to my husband because he was quiet around him, maybe that was because he, my friend, had some bad association about what quiet meant and was deeply uncomfortable with quiet, right? And I can relate to that. I've had some old trauma around that myself. And so I get that, but it's not an accurate read on my ex-husband, right? In other words, your friends may not be able to see your partner fully and clearly because of their own past experiences. So you can think of like all of this, the lizard brain, the past history, the beliefs and biases, as seeing through smoggy, scratched up glasses instead of seeing through clear ones, right? And then here's an extra issue on top of that, which is when our own lizard brain is rearing its head, like when we are upset or hurting, that's when our negative seeing glasses go on as well. You've heard me also refer to this as flaw sight. And that's from that place, right? We are extra vulnerable to other people's lizard brain thoughts and ideas, their judgments, their overblown fears for you, their own projections. So in other words, if we're already in a hard place or we're feeling pain or upset in our relationship, it is absolutely not a good time to hear other close to us, like family and friends, negative judgments and lizard brain thoughts and opinions about our partner, because we're especially vulnerable to taking that on as a truth. And it will make us feel worse about our partner and have a harder time making our marriage any better. So I want you to hear this. Our lizard brains and our friends are not a source of wisdom or truth for us about our marriage. We have to tune into other parts of ourselves for that, which generally means calming the lizard brain and finding our way into our wise brain, our heart, these more evolved, more wise, and more highly intelligent parts of ourselves. Now, this is not a topic for today, but it absolutely, getting there absolutely entails soothing the nervous system and learning how to work with your brain in the way that it thinks. My point, though, is that allowing ourselves to take on board other people's lizard brain thoughts and judgments, which happens easily when our own lizard brain is loud and activated, that is a sure ticket to more marital pain, not less. Now, like I said last week, of course it's important to have people we can turn towards for empathy and compassion when things aren't great in our relationship. It's important to know that we have people who love and support us and want what's best for us. What we don't need, though, is someone deepening and confirming our worst lizard brain judgments and fears, who's going to say, yeah, I mean, what a jerk he is, right? Like these types of things, right? Or even something like, well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if this is the right person for you. We don't need to have the weight and the harshness of other people's negative opinions when we're trying to sort through and guide our own lizard brain into a more relationship-empowered, love and mutual respect conducive place. Our own lizard brain already makes that hard enough, right? Especially if you don't have the skills to kind of walk yourself out of that. It's really important to remember that complaining and building a case against our partner will never give us the love we want, like I reminded you last week. And this really does include letting others' thoughts about our partner build a case against him. So what do you do about other people's opinions? Great question. Don't take them on board if they are harsh without a very, very careful filtering through of what you know of your honey. Remember that other people's opinions are subjective, not objective. They are subjective. They're simply a way that that person, your family, your friend, is reading into reality. Their opinion, in other words, is just a thought about your partner or your relationship. It is not a fact. It is not true. It is just one way of seeing, and most likely a very skewed way of seeing. So I generally suggest that if you have a friend who does like to share her judgments of your partner with you, to simply ask her to no longer do so, or tell her you want to love your husband, not indulge in negative thoughts about him from now on. And you could consider that with this person, your partner is like politics are, right? For some families, something that you just simply steer clear of in this friendship, because of course there's plenty of other things to connect with this friend about. Their thoughts on your marriage don't need to have airtime, in other words, right? But for times when you do actually hear a critical comment, then your job is to separate that opinion out as their thought, right? Tell yourself it's a story that your friend is believing, not a fact about your partner. And just because they see your partner that way does not make it true, right? And then you can ask yourself, what is true for me about him? Because that is what actually matters. So separating out other people's thoughts from your own and not taking on their ideas and opinions can be difficult for sure, particularly if that person is someone you admire and respect. I know this very deeply myself. But it is a super important skill to have, because otherwise you're going to be at the mercy of whatever beliefs and passing thoughts other people, particularly people you like and admire, are expressing, right? And that's just not fair to you or your relationship. Because again, they actually do not know your partner on the level you do. And even if they don't like him, they are not you. And so they can't possibly see the things you do in him or have the same connection. So what matters in your marriage is your very own thoughts and opinions. That is what matters. It's true that there are tons of ways to see another human being, but of all those ways, what way do you want to see your partner? What do you believe about them in your heart? So I'm going to give you some more questions here to help with this. Questions you can ask yourself if something someone said sort of seeps into you and you notice you're kind of taking it on or giving it weight or authority. So you can ask yourself, is this something I want to take on as my own? Is this idea, their thought, going to help or hurt my marriage if I buy into it? Is this opinion going to help me see more clearly or give me access to more acceptance and love in my marriage for my partner? Is this opinion going to serve my marriage and my goal of happiness in it? So I really recommend you ask yourself these questions. You take the time to slow down. It doesn't have to be right in the moment when you hear a friend say something critical, but maybe later if you notice you're kind of feeling dragged down by it. Like, oh no, maybe this is true, or maybe he's not, it's bringing up a lot of doubt and kind of confusion in you. Absolutely, it's worth taking the time to sit yourself down and even write these questions out and answer them. It will really help you separate out what's true for you and what's just other people's sort of static from their brain, their own thoughts. And by the way, these questions can be really helpful if you have that tendency to kind of imagine what other people are thinking and about your partner, or like even if they haven't said anything, you just have this idea that they don't like him, and you can sit yourself down and ask these same questions as well. Now, I want you to notice how this doesn't mean, like none of what I've said means never being open to hearing a friend's concerns. But it's about being empowered enough to sort through what is their story that they made up about your partner versus what is true for you about your partner or your relationship. And this is also not to say you should kind of have walls around you that mean that you never turn to friends or family for support around your relationship or share things with them. I mean, there might be people you choose to not share about your relationship with, like I mentioned earlier, but that's also not what I'm saying should be the case across the board, right? Like I said last time, it's only natural to open up about the important things in your life with those you care about, and that includes your marriage, right? So here are some other ways to include friends in your experience of your relationship that will serve your relationship rather than harm it. And I did share a little bit along these same lines last week. So you can go listen to that last podcast episode as well if you want more ideas. Number one, if other people are expressing good opinions about your partner, feel free to embrace those. Remember that our brain has the tendency to tilt over disproportionately to the negative, so that it's like about 2/3 of the time focused on the negative as compared to 1/3 of the time seeing sort of the positive, which means it takes more conscious effort to even just see clearly. And so taking on positive opinions, getting help to see what's good and great about your partner and your relationship is actually very healthy and nourishing for your relationship. So you can even go seek that out with your friends. So you can ask them to help you see what's great about your partner, and what the two of you have going for you. The second thing you can do here to include them in your relationship is to ask them to share where they think you could relate to your partner in a way that is more loving and kind and effective, seeing as that is something you can actually do something about and feedback that you can use to improve things. So that's a great way to invite your friend to collaborate with you to make your marriage better. And the third thing is, if you ever do want to invite a friend or a family member's full opinion into your relationship, make sure you trust that not only does the person truly want what is best for you, but that they want what's best for your partner and your relationship as well. And that they aren't just expressing judgment because they like to do it, or that they're caught up in that current fad of male bashing, like we talked about last episode. You can even ask your friend to only share her thoughts if they're coming from a true place of care for both you and your partner, and they're meant to benefit your marriage. And ultimately, I suggest only doing so, asking friends who are already in a thriving, fulfilling, happy marriage, and who you also consider aligned with your values and such. And ideally, who also have a great understanding of what they themselves have done to make their marriage so good, and are able to give you advice that's the kind that focuses on where you have power to improve things and that isn't focused on your partner. There's a lot of relationship advice out there that doesn't focus on that, and it just won't help. Maybe you have someone in your life like that, and if so, amazing. But it's understandable if you don't, because this is a little bit of a high bar to set, but I really stand by it because I don't want you being influenced by people who don't know how to have great relationships. So even better than turning to one friend who meets all these kind of high bars, if you want to involve other women's support into your marriage, surround yourself with the women who are doing this deeply and making their marriages come alive with the love and support they've always wanted, like you will in Treasured. This is part of why I created Treasured and have made it into partially a group program, because we are naturally influenced by those around us, right? And you want that influence to be one that's moving in the direction that you want, that serves the goal that you have for your marriage. And so in Treasured, we are all working towards that together, the goal of having a wonderful, amazing marriage. And so it's a super positive influence, and will actually speed up the process of you getting to the happiness and connection and love that you want with your partner. So if that interests you at all, please note that the doors for the very last round of Treasured for this year, the group portion of this program, will close on June 20th. For various reasons, I've decided to make this next round the last cohort of the year, which might be kind of radical because I know we have lots of months left for the year, but it's how I'm doing things this year. So don't miss this boat. Get your join form in by or before June 20th to reserve your spot. The sooner the better, because it's totally possible this will fill up fast. So you can learn more about Treasured and get access to that join form by going to the show notes. I'll put the description there. We can head over to my website. It's www.lifeisworthloving.com/treasured. And let me end with saying that the most important opinion is the one you have of your marriage, of your partner. And that is actually within your control. You are in charge of that. So don't give that power away to someone who doesn't actually value or care about your relationship as much as you do. Be oh so well, my friend.